Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. We're into week 3 of 2025, the perfect time we thought to do our 2024 award show. We'll be picking our men's test innings and spells of the year, as well as revealing the magazine's men's test team of 2024. There'll also be reaction to the news that James Vince will play in the PSL over the County Championship in 2025, and we'll talk about 2 English seamers who might make their test debuts in 2025. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Phil Walker and Ben Gardner. Coming up later, we have Mark Butcher, and we also have Dan Worrell, one of those 2 aforementioned potential New England seamers who chatted to Mel Farrell just before Christmas. Before people on YouTube shout at us, we'll be splitting the podcast into different chunks on YouTube this week for the end of year awards. We'll be back to normal next week. Let's get straight into it, our end of year awards. I think, first of all, I'm going to say, not a disclaimer, but I guess a scene setter. Anyone who is remotely riled up by our lists, just calm down, take a breather, go for a walk, put your laptop down. I don't want the comments to go crazy. We put a lot of thought into this, but we're obviously going to come up with lists that are probably slightly different to yours.
When you said we put a lot of thought into this, are you putting that in any kind of air quotes, or are you saying that sincerely?
No, we have actually. So the long list that you were sent in the extensive show notes was the product of
one of the few production meetings we've ever had for the podcast.
But also one of an amazing piece of work by our producer Dan, who's had a spreadsheet all year, ranking all the innings and spells that are any good with loads of different metrics.
Wow. I did not know this.
Including things like the percentage of runs scored in innings, what the score would have been like if you take the innings out, that sort of thing.
Just for kicks?
Well, it was what informed the long list that you were sent.
So was that the specific reason for him doing it?
Yeah. Genuinely, yeah.
Building to this crescendo.
Yeah, this is it.
What a guy.
Feel surprised that anyone does some research or some work.
I just thought you'd grab these out your ass. Popped them on an email 10 minutes before the show.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, Daniel.
I like how much are heading off any backlash. I think you should, before all sections we do, just say, if you are really angry about our discussion of Sam Cooke, just take a walk.
I think anger in different areas is okay, but this is
a bit.
This is so meaningless. Yeah. This is just a list.
Anyway, enjoy the show.
Anyway, yeah. On the list and looking at our carefully curated long list, I'd say just a pattern in 2024 that we've touched upon before, but I think it's worth addressing straight up. There are a lot of freakish hundreds where someone has counter-attacked out of a hole or done something crazy on their own to get their team back into a game, and there are fewer big proper first innings runs than perhaps other lists that we've done in the past. There are actually very, very few big first innings hundreds on our list overall. Ben, we had a clear 1 and 2 before we reveal what is number 1. Do you want to tell us what the 2 are?
Yeah, and they're sort of a piece in that freakish zone that you say, with the sort of batters having to conquer quite extreme conditions, you'd say, against very good bowlers for those conditions in sort of a tough match situations. One of them is Ollie Pope's 190 odd against India at Hyderabad in England's first test of the year. You know, when obviously so much hype going into that series, you know, Bazball versus India, and it doesn't go well for England to start with, obviously, with they sort of collapse on that first day. I think Stokes bats okay, but that's it. And then Hartley gets a pasting. India get up a massive lead. And then India should just be able to win it from there. And yet Pope just comes out and, you know, this is his downfall sometimes. He comes out and sees a way that he thinks it's best to play it and then does that. And, you know, we've seen more often than not this year, it doesn't come off, but this time it absolutely did come off. He was, you know, reversing and sweeping just like continuously. Because the conditions, you know, wouldn't let him sort of... In the end, it was quite a long innings, but because he was attacking and, you know, hitting the bowls off their length and that sort of thing, and then it ends up setting up what is, even though the series went the way it did, one of England's great wins in India. So that's one of them.
People like Rahul Dravid and Joe Root describe it as the best innings they've seen in Asia, and right up there with the best they've seen of any batter in Asia.
Yeah. And the reason why it's not a runaway number one is because of Aiden Markram doing a similar-ish thing, although South Africa didn't win the game, but in actually seeing friendly conditions that were even more freakish, really. That test against India, which is, I think was the shortest test in history in terms
Remind us what happened in that game, because when we were coming up with our list, quite a few things popped up from that test.
Yeah, was it 23 or 24 wickets on the first day? South Africa bundled out for nothing on the first morning. Then India looked like they were going to get a match-defining lead and then lost 6 wickets for no runs at the end of their first innings. And then Markram kind of just comes out, well, you can sort of say comes out and has a hit, but just comes out and just plays like he's on a completely different surface, basically. Like, we know he's such a pure player of fast bowling. And even though it was, moving all over the place against a very skillful India attack, he was able to just, crash this 100 at a run a ball. And had he been able to stretch that innings out sort of 30, 40 more runs, you could have had a real finish in your hands, and he couldn't quite do it, but still.
Yeah. I mean, the scorecard for that is just totally ridiculous. So South Africa get 176. Aiden Markram gets 106 of those runs. Second high score, 12. Dean Elgar, his fellow opening partner. And yeah, they set India 80, which, given that test match, it wasn't out of the realms of possibility that would have been defended by South Africa. So those are 1 and 2. We'll get to in which way they're ordered later. Phil, when you had a look, what was in your top 5, top 6?
Well, Pope didn't make my top 6, which is probably harsh. But it has a slightly fluky air about it because of what followed and because of what preceded it as well.
And because of what was in it as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it was, ludicrously audacious innings, and it all paid off. No one can ever take that innings away from him, but because it stands so alone, it didn't factor in my thinking, to be honest. The Markram innings is a given. I mean, as Ben's described, it's a freak knock, and it's a freak knock by our the best rubbish player in the world, Aiden Markram,
or the worst amazing player.
Or the worst amazing player, yeah. Who goes alongside KL Rahul, Zach Crawley, maybe one or two others. They're like the holy trinity for me, of brilliant bad players. And so Markram is an absolute given. Nisanka's 100, 4th innings 100 to take that test match at the Oval was technically brilliant. I thought 120 odd not out, 126 not out, I think that was, against an England side that were looking for a clean sweep across the summer. And for the story of Sri Lankan cricket, I think that was quite an important innings and a beautiful innings to watch. Lytton Dass's 138, obviously, goes without saying, 26 for 6. And the third time, my favourite stat, which I roll out every couple of weeks on this show, the third time that Lytton Das has made 100 when the top 6 have all folded and the team is at best 50 for 5. Players have only done it once before in history, and Lytton Das has already done it 3 times.
Wow.
So he's basically the best bad innings player in the history of the game. His 138 there helped nail that test match against Pakistan.
And it's a series that we don't talk about that much, I think, because of what New Zealand did in India. Bangladesh going to Pakistan and winning 2-0 is so significant. Bangladesh have never done anything remotely like that before. I guess maybe they're winning New Zealand, but they didn't win that series.
Yeah, and also we don't talk about it as much because it's hard to quite fit it into the whole narrative of the year. Like you can't, because it was such a good year where everyone beat everyone. You're trying to work out exactly how big an achievement it is, because Pakistan do that, and then Bangladesh do that, and then England come over, win the first test. You're like, oh well, Pakistan is just rubbish at home. Then Pakistan win the next 2, and you're like, oh okay, actually maybe that raises it a bit. But then South Africa go to Bangladesh and then beat Bangladesh. So it's like, oh, Bangladesh actually any good, or was that a bit of a flash in the pan? That felt like the whole year was just like results that was actually quite hard to predict. A lot of series that were going on, but yeah, and that innings as well on another. Not it was nowhere near Markram levels of seam friendly, but a seaming pitch, which at that time Pakistan thought was how they wanted to do it. And Karam Shazad in particular, I think took 6 for in that innings, and he's a good bowler, and so to hit an attack containing him off their length basically, it reminded me a bit actually of a mid-noughties innings of Cameron Akmal against India.
Very good shout, yeah, in a brilliant 1-1 series. A halved series, yeah. Very good shout. And again, 6 down for next to nothing. Jaiswal's double 100 in the second test against England back in February. 209, 290 balls, 7 sixes, 19 fours. Now, that's pretty good in 600 for 4 declared. But he made it with the next highest score. Shubman Gill made 34. And the context, obviously, is that England nicked the first one. And so this was just the kid's 6th test match. And the big dogs were in the midst of their midlife crisis, if you like. And he came out and played like that. An extraordinary knock, really, mainlining prime Sehwag in the piece. And it began like a statement year, really, for the best young cricketer in the world, best young batter in the world.
It was 209 out of 396 in a game that India only win by 106.
Well, this is
I think because it was 4-1, we forget actually how that series could have gone another way.
We don't in this room.
We don't in this room, but
No.
in most other rooms they do forget.
Yeah.
For me, that innings, it almost looks better on the scorecard than it was in real life, just because of England's slightly questionable bowling quality, I'd say. So I had another Jaiswal innings on my list, which was the 100 in the first test of that series in the Border Gavaskar Trophy, and I think the only thing you could say against that 100 is the last maybe 40 or so runs of it, India were quite far ahead in the game at that point. But on the second half of the second day, when India had been rolled and then Australia had been rolled, and then you're thinking like, well, this could just be a shootout of a test match, and then him and Kara Hall as well, just completely just iced the situation in like an incredibly composed, technically correct way. And also, I guess the other thing is that was the innings where, like, obviously we already suspected that Jaiswal was going to be like an absolute, megastar dominating the game. But that was the innings where it's like, oh wow, this kid is already like one of the very, very best players in the world in a whole range of conditions. So that's why I had that one in there over the England one. But
fair enough.
Both stunning knocks.
Trivia. Only one other player this century has made a double 100 in a test match innings with no other player making 50. Trivia. Got till the end of the show. All right.
So on Jaiswal, I found it interesting with, I suppose they're 4 of the best 5 players in the world right now. Head, Root, Brook and Jaiswal actually just picking their best hundreds in the year. I think with Root, I could only come up with one that is like...
Made 500s this year,
he made 500s this year.
And when we were talking about the sports personality thing, we were saying he's had a good year, but just a very routine year. He made 5 tons.
Yeah. But I think his best one is probably the 122 in the 4th test against India.
Ranchi?
Ranchi, yeah. When the ball was sort of a lot of uneven bounce for a day one pitch.
Yeah.
And actually coming off the back as well of the reverse scoop as well. So he basically just went back to being Joe Root and actually pulled out one of his absolute best innings. Yeah.
And then Harry Brook, which of Brook's
it's
innings
123.
even better than the 100? Because the 100 meant that they scored 800 and they had to score 800. It's not one of those 800 for 5s. First of all, no one really scores 800 ever.
Sure.
And they had to score 800 to win that test match.
They
which
didn't.
Which is
they
mental.
didn't, because they could have scored 500 and bowled them out and then knocked off 300 on the final day.
I'm not sure.
The 123 was a masterpiece in the way that the 300 wasn't. In my view, the ball was doing loads of things that it wasn't doing in Multan. It was a better attack, much better attack, and the top order had been knocked over already. Matt Henry's as good a quick as you can see, and he chose to run down the pitch to get to the pitch and then drive them over extra cover throughout the morning session. Got 91 ball 100. Should have given up 7 chances, gave up none. The previous week he made 170 odd and gave up 6 chances there. He didn't give a chance in that 123. That's his most complete innings, I think, for England that I've seen, considering who he's up against, the pitch that it was on. The 300, you got to remember as well. Root was the man on for 300, and it was only when Root finally carked it, fell over in a heap, and staggered off, that Brook, with this sort of newfound fitness, said, all right, well, I'll chance my arm for the last 100 odd. and then sort of sachet to the triple. But it was never on until it happened with Brooke. And they had given up, Pakistan, by that point. They had resigned themselves to what was happening. It wasn't quite Hayden at Perth against Zimbabwe, but it wasn't a million miles off, right? It was. There was the only tension for the last day in that game was how many individual records can these two break, rather than is this a contest?
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting point that we've touched on a few of these innings is when someone gets a massive score, what percentage of that massive score is meaningful or meaningful to the end result? And that Jaiswal one, for example, he actually really does need to score 200 for the games that end up the way it ended up. Travis Head, Ben, what was his best 100 in 2024?
Yeah, well, I think it is Adelaide for me. And again, another theme of this is like trying to almost remove how a series ended up and remember how the 100 felt at the time. Yeah. And with this one, you had obviously India winning that first test. You still had, obviously the series was kind of alive until the end, but especially at this point, you had like Australia having just this feeling of we just can't beat these guys kind of thing, like they'd been a decade since they'd won a series against them. Even when India were, reduced and on paper Australia should have been way ahead, they just kind of couldn't do it. And in this series coming up against, Jasprit Bumrah, who had one of the great series performances, certainly in a series defeat that anyone's ever had, basically. And so you have the second day of that, you have Head obviously playing in his own style, but again, and in his own tempo, but again in a completely chanceless way to just almost Australia, I think, of certain points in that time, in that period where they haven't been able to beat India, have had their foots in the throats and have just let it off before time. And this was a moment when Head was just absolutely not going to do that, even when there were, guys falling around him and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's the one for me that was like this, like again, and also an important thing for Head actually, in that he had, best batter in the world across formats in one way, but also actually in Test cricket had a bit of a fallow time since the World Championship final, I think. So for him to do that as well, to stamp his mark on, one of the biggest two series going at least, was was
I mean that 100 just felt epic, packed home crowd for Head, and you're right, Australia hadn't beaten India in such a long time, and it felt at that point India were on top. They were going to do it somehow, going to do it again, even with really inexperienced bowling attack, and it did change the momentum of the series. Any others? I've got a long list. Ravindra, you think Ravindra is right up there? 100 against India in the first Test win of that series.
Yeah, I feel like I've been talking about this innings for weeks and months, and actually it's begun to feature in the magazine more than strictly necessary. It felt so seismic at the time. 134 from 150 odd deliveries, 4 sixes. Technically brilliant against the turning ball. Bear in mind that India had got skittled for 46 earlier in the piece. And it showcased what I thought is the real starting point, the real statement starting point for what's going to be a really top class international career. And I still believe that will happen. I think he has all the components. But the dud England series post that India series, and he didn't get runs in the following 2 Test matches of any note either. And so the innings stands out as a bit of on its own terms, and is a bit isolated at the moment in his story. But I watched basically all of it because I figured that if New Zealand are not going to get beat 3-0 in this series, then it's all on that day. It's on day 2. And so it proved, because Sarfraz Khan smashed 160 and they got not far away from actually making it very difficult for New Zealand to win that Test, despite getting knocked over 46 on the second morning. But anyway, that one goes in there. I think on his day, there's a fluency to the way that he plays, which is a bit special. He also made a double 100 earlier in the year, earlier in the previous year, albeit against South Africa's second team. I'm fascinated by where he ends up as a player, but that innings in and of itself deserves to be in this conversation, I think.
I think he'll be okay. I think that his series against England echoes of Brooke in the home summer, that he looked $1 million, but just kept getting. He wasn't got out by England that often. That was what was so frustrating about it. just some other hundreds.
Just in the brackets of that series, the 86 that Latham made in the second Test match.
I wouldn't even have it in the
list.
brackets. Yeah,
Yeah. I think that was I think as important, if not more important, than the Ravindra one. And it's one of those where if he scores 14 more runs, it's talked about so much more. But that was so good.
But the real hipsters
So
love
good.
an 86.
The real hipsters love one of England's best Ashes hundreds in the last decade. Joe Denley's 94 at the Oval.
Sure.
I've got two more in the Ravindra mold, sort of kind of coming of age. This guy's amazing Test hundreds, and then actually one more sub 100 score. So they fits in with all of it. So we've got Kamindu Mendis against England second Test. Third innings is falls just short of getting strength to talk where they're properly in the game, but still troubling and in that chase. But it was also like we knew this guy had like a ridiculous first-class average, and we'd seen he'd been sort of racking up runs for fun in conditions which you'd assume would suit him. But this was him just playing like just. It was just the most remarkable thing was just how almost ordinary it was and simple. It was just like watching a really experienced, established batter just make 100 basically. You just it's like, right, I'm just gonna I'm gonna. It's not as if he was having it going out and smashing it, and for a young player batting actually low down the order at that point was really impressive.
It was so good. It was so good because you see the numbers, you saw what he was doing in Asia, and you always wonder can he do it in completely different conditions against a side that was doing very well in home conditions. And it was chanceless. It was technically correct. He very good defense, but also it was so good square of the wicket on the offside as well. I was watching, just thinking, oh, he's so good now.
Yeah.
He's not the name for the future. He's a name for now. And there's also one of those where if you think about where the game was when that innings finished, Sri Lanka could have easily won that game. If it's not for that Root Jamie Smith partnership on the final day, Sri Lanka could have easily won that Test match. It's not Kamindu's fault that they didn't get over the line with the ball. So I think that's a really good shout.
So then I've also got, and I think this guy should have been more in the Fab Four debate that you had in the magazine, but it's Cameron Green's 174 against New Zealand. So similar actually in terms of just looking at on the scorecard to that Jaiswal one. 174 out of a total of 383. No one else makes it to 50. And in a game also where actually none of the other team scores are above 170. So he's almost kind of outscoring. He scored as much more innings himself as any team has got in that game. And again, just a proper New Zealand attack. Southey, Henry, O'Rourke, and on a pitch that was helpful. And I think we can just forget about him just because he just has been injured. But actually, that was an innings batting at number 4 as well in that engine room where you were like, okay, this guy's actually now from being a guy who's played.
He doesn't have any others yet though, does he? Any real notable?
Two
Test hundreds, I think, all in.
Yeah, but I think that felt to me at least like he was about basically that he had cracked it, and then he just gets injured. I think he's only played the second Test of that series.
We were saying on the Patreon last week that he's also younger than people probably realise. He's not actually played a Test match after his 25th birthday yet. So I think he's younger than Kamindu Mendis, for example.
Anyone got Bethel's 10?
Bethel. Well, I had all 6 Bethel knocks for the series against New Zealand.
And you had Rabada's 31 as well, didn't you?
So I was I had Kagisa Rabada's 31 not out against Pakistan.
Great shout.
Historic innings, chanceless, flair.
It's more important
attacking
than
vigor.
Brooks' triple.
Yeah, so I think Rabada's 31's high up on my list. What else have we got?
Constance's silly morning.
No, we're not.
Oh, look at this! Look at the disdain. Oh,
it's batting like Raygun. Is that the thing? So the other one, the proper one that I had was Alex Carey's 98 not out, acing a chase for Australia against New Zealand. Again, if that's 2 runs more, then that's 100 from number 7 to chase down 280 odd, and a series against a very good team away from home, and even Australia were 80 for 5 in that innings when he comes in chasing 280. He puts in a partnership with Mitch Marsh, and then with Pat Cummins, who I think Pat Cummins is one of his average in situations where the team needs him. If you there's any possible way to quantify that, is so much higher than it is in general. If ever Australia just need 30, he will get it, and at other times he it doesn't happen. So
the anti-late 2000s Ian Bell.
Yeah, exactly. But so Alex Carey for that, and he's another one who I think his career is obviously split into phases, often by off-field things, whether it's haircuts or falling into swimming pools. But that was a very good innings for a guy who sort of looked again like a main man for Australia at
Right,
that
let's
point.
let's come up with our top 5. So Markham number 1. I'm going to put Ollie Pope number 2, even though I share your reservations about it, just because of I guess what most people in cricket thought of at the time, and 196 in the third innings for England to win just their first test just a second test in India in 10 years. And at that point, India's home record was so good. Doesn't look quite as good at the end of 2024, but I think I'm quite keen to have Pope high up on that list.
Fine by me, mate.
But then 3, 4, 5. Any of you gonna really push for any of them?
Lytton Das was my number 3 after those two. Did you have a top 5, Phil? Was it in order? Or
No.
Oh, okay. But how would you feel about Lytton Das at number 3?
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I think lower down.
Oh yeah.
It's not a great attack.
Yeah, that is fair. It's Karim Shazad, and then it's Muhammad Ali.
If you're picking
and
Karim
Mir
Shazad
Hamza.
as the main guy,
Yeah,
as
that's
opposed
true.
to boy that attack, it's not a great attack, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Still
Top 5 though.
Yeah, I'm happy with that top 5. I want a JSwell, and I think I want Head.
Yeah, you do really like that head knock.
Mm.
Head personally wouldn't be in my top 5, but I'd be comfortable with it. If it's Jaiswal, as I've said, it would be the first test of that series. I don't know if Phil wants to pull rank on Jaiswal.
No, I think Jaiswal has to feature. That double was spectacular.
So you'd have that over the Perth knock.
Yeah, definitely. Context is everything.
And then
And I would have Brooks' innings over Head's innings personally.
okay, I'm comfortable with that.
I think I would also have Brook over.
Should we go Brook at 3?
But if you get rid of Lytton,
Yeah.
you have my badge. All right, I'm done.
Lytton's at 5.
Lytton's at 5.
So I'm going, just for clarity, Markram 106 against India, Pope 196, Brooks 123 against New Zealand, Jaiswal's 209 against England at the start of the year, and Lytton Das is 138 against Pakistan.
What's the matter, Gardner?
Well, I guess I'm fine with it being Jaiswal's double over the. It's just you look at the bowlers. You look at.
Don't go through it again. You've already argued
but
this.
you look at Tom Hartley and
Mate,
Bashir
it's a
versus.
third innings knock where they're already up in the game, and there's another man getting 100 at the other end, or getting 80 at the other end. Relax.
Okay. I
I think we need to move on.
Yeah, I can also just the people who are getting angry at us are going to be varying with. We've got 2 England knocks in the top 3. That's fine.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
We play loads of Test cricket. That's it. If there was a bottom 5, there'd also be all England innings. So.
Yeah. Also, a very serious point around that. Actually, when we were coming up with the list, we really did discount a lot of innings because they were against England. We're like that's really good, but actually, how good is it because it was against England at various points in the year?
I tell you what, this time next year is going to be harder and more prickly to do this show.
Because there's barely any Test matches.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky and probably a bit demoralising.
Yeah. I mean, South Africa don't play a home Test match for basically 2 years.
Before you crack on, remember my trivia?
Yeah,
I do. I do.
I
Actually.
think I know it.
All
I
right.
haven't looked it up. I think I know.
We'll come to it at the end.
Should we do it now?
Okay.
If we both got an answer.
Yeah. My answer is Virender Sehwag.
Incorrect.
Oh, what?
Nathan Astle?
Incorrect.
No, I don't
So
know.
someone got 50 in that 2-0 whatever out of 300 at Gaul.
Do you want me to bring it up? I don't know. I mean, it was just on one of the big websites.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I mean,
I
on your
believe you.
website. It's when I was writing up the Jaiswal thing.
I believe you. So,
What is the answer?
Brian Charles.
Of course it was.
Brian Charles, Adelaide in 06, he made a double 100. It's kind of his valedictory double, really. And no one else made shit.
Yeah, so just getting the scorecard.
Are you
up
now
for
hungrily looking up the Christchurch Astle?
that.
No.
This is a great scorecard. Lara 226, next best score 34 in a score of 405 against an attack of McGrath, Lee, Warner, McGill.
Yeah.
Quite good. I'd like to think that would have topped our list that year.
I was close. Sehwag 201, Gambier 56, Latchman 39. No one else got into double figures.
Yeah, but you're wrong.
Yeah, sure, but it's as a guess. I'm happy with going out on Sehwag.
Anyway, that's it for part 1. In part 2, spells of the year.